Woo! We made it.
We made it. It's just the two of us, but we made it.
What's up? What's up? What's up, y'all? It's Dr. Paul with Dr. Shelby tonight.
And Jack.
And Jack, the star of the show. Woo! We got a fun show tonight.
Oh my God.
It's just us boys because Larry is flying an aircraft, which is how he pays his bills. We can't be upset about that, although it is annoying when it gets in the way of, talking about comic books, man. And dear Phil is feeling under the weather. So we called up Dr. Thompson and said, hey, man, can you pinch hit again? He said, absolutely. And then, in fact, we were talking about what we wanted to do for content. And we were just geeking out about this auction coming up at Heritage, which is just insane. Just huge books.
Go get your tissues because you're going to be having orgasms.
Shelby, I told you my mom watches the show, man.
Sorry.
So we were talking about some of the books in this upcoming auction. So this gal, Chris Farrell, we're going to talk about her in a little bit, but just as a preview, she collected every single DC book ever published, including the pre-hero stuff. Insane.
From 1935 all the way up to 2007 when she finished her collection. It's amazing.
The dedication of this woman and also the discerning eye she had. So many high-grade copies. She's got mile-high copies. So many just really insane books. Well, we were looking through it. There's some really insane restored books, but there were also some real monster conserved books. And so we came up with an idea to do something unique tonight. After our fair market value segment, we're going to preview all of the conserved books that are coming up in the Heritage auction for the Christine Farrell collection. I think they said that she preferred Chris. So I'm going to call her Chris the rest of the show, but we'll see. Like I said, we'll get into that a little bit more. Let's do some shout outs. How you doing, Shelby?
I'm good, man.
How's your week?
It's depressing a little bit, because I'm still looking for a job, but then also exciting because, I get to devote a little bit of time to our favorite hobby, which is comic books.
Yeah.
I'm more excited than a fat kid on a birthday cake.
Nice.
So we have a couple of people from my channel already jumping over Las Cruces and Voodoo. So welcome.
Hello. Glad to have you here. My buddy Hugo Danner's here. Hey, Mike, what's up? John Scamardo, welcome. The professor's here. Love to see the professor. And Jason Adrift, as I like to call him. Hey, what's up, man? Yep. Glad to have you here.
I answered one of Jason's questions today, and Peter and I spoke on the phone probably almost an hour last night. So,
yeah. Well, we're very active in our comic book community, our conservation community, which is the Facebook group. And we're collaborating broadly with all kinds of people across all kinds of channels. In addition to the two fellows we already mentioned, Phil at Phantom Restoration, Larry over at Flying L, Shelby's channel, which is Shelby's Comics. A couple of weeks ago, we had Jerry the Jitterbug on. And of course, we've had the professor, Peter Alachi, whose channel is Experiments in Conservation. We've had him on several times. So we're basically broadly collaborating. Our goal is to just advance the knowledge of comic book conservation, share the love, and have fun, and maybe preserve some treasures, and maybe even create a little bit of equity. So that's what we're all about here.
Exactly. Peter just dropped a great video about a little bit of math of pulp. If you're interested, he wrote it all out really nice. He's got some beautiful penmanship. Of course, Dr. Paul's been dropping some things about pulp too, a little bit of cooking pulp. So be sure and check that out. Jerry's been restoring that Batman, I believe.
It's an early issue of Tech.
Detective, thank you.
It's a pre-Robin Tech issue. Yeah.
And yeah, I'm starting my 3-part Halloween series. So on Wednesday, I dropped a video on Wendy, the Good Little Witch.
That's great.
That comic book, and then next week will be a 2-parter on a really cool scary book. So you don't want to miss that.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. You know, the other thing that happened this week is yesterday was the last day for voting for the YouTube Comic Book Community Awards. So I want to thank everybody that voted. We'll see. Jerry the Jitterbug is the overdog. He won the last 2 years. So we'll see if somebody can depose him. It'll be fun regardless. And like I've been saying, whoever wins that award, all the finalists are winners, and they're all doing it for love. So give them a shout out, and good luck to everybody. We'll, I think we're going to find out now that the voting was open for quite a long time, but now that voting closed, I think they're going to tally the votes, and we're going to have a show live reveal in just a few weeks, right? So that'll be fun.
I think it's going to be pretty quick. It's in November, if I remember right, but don't quote me on that. And I got to discover a lot of new channels I hadn't found in my explorations just by going through the nominees. So
yeah, same.
Really
I wasn't aware of all those channels. That was fun. Funny you should bring this up, Jason. So Susan Ciccone has become a little more active. Phil is actively speaking to her and interacting with her, and we are reaching out to see if she's interested in joining the show, and in fact, to see if she's interested in collaborating in some other ways too that we're not quite ready to reveal yet. So appreciate you mentioning her, but obviously someone who everybody in the hobby should know, one of the pioneers of comic book restoration. And of course, in the day, there wasn't really a distinction between restoration and conservation. It was all kind of, these are all the things we do, some of which now since have been separated out into conservation and restoration. But so she's a practitioner of in addition to restoration, a practitioner of all of the traditional methods of conservation as well. So
I mean,
we hope to see her actually here soon. I won't say more than that about it.
Yeah, looking at her Facebook and the techniques that she employed, even though we might have called that restoration 20 years ago, I do feel like it was more conservation work she was doing a lot of. So I don't think she's going in there with pens and markers and filling in creases. But
no, but she does do a lot of color touch, and she tends to color touch a lot of books.
Did not.
But other than that, the techniques, you know, as I said, there's a lot of overlap in the techniques. Well, everybody saw our thumbnail, so we got a good idea what the fair market value segment is about today. I think maybe I'll jump right in. How does Jack feel about that?
Jack's showing his. Oh, thank you, Jack. Jack's got his booty to the camera, so he must be ready.
So we get a break from Golden Age.
We have not done a Silver Age.
We haven't
book
done a
yet.
Silver Age
I was
book
so
in a while.
excited when you sent me this picture. I was like, "Wow, this is great."
Yeah, this just hammered in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I am I think this makes for a very interesting conversation, and so I'm excited to talk about this book. And I know we have a lot of Silver Age fans in the group. A lot of us main collecting interest is in the Silver Age, so I'm pretty excited to talk about this one. Amazing Fantasy 15, August 1962. So if we start to think about what was happening over at Atlas, which is what Marvel Comics was called at the time in the late 50s, early 60s, you have basically some Western books, some other silly stuff going on.
Some romance.
You don't have a single superhero book being published by what we call today Marvel. Again, at the time they were called Atlas. They're not publishing a single superhero book. They are publishing sci-fi and horror mashups. They're publishing Journey into Mystery, Tales of Suspense, and Tales to Astonish. And they were starting to tell in these anthology series, they were starting to tell some stories that bordered back on pulpy superhero stuff. So one of them was The Man in the Anthill, which introduced us to Hank Pym. At the time, not really a superhero story. One of them was in Journey into Mystery 83, where they introduced Thor. Of course, where they really got going was Fantastic Four #1, which is 1961. But shortly thereafter, it looked like superheroes were coming back on the scene. Brave and the Bold 28 had dropped. Justice League of America was selling like hotcakes for National/DC. And Marvel finally got their weight behind superheroes. And then you have this flush of where can we find some superhero stories to publish? So in a very short period, we get Fantastic Four, we get Spider-Man, we get Thor, we get Iron Man, we get Ant-Man retooled. So we get the Hank Pym story retooled as Ant-Man. And then not long after that, we see the Wasp, we get Hulk, and then we get the Avengers and X-Men in 1 month. And then not long after that, Daredevil, who I consider to be kind of the last Silver Age proper hero over at Marvel. But it all happens in a very short span, and less than 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. You had Fantastic Four that came out near the end, I believe, like November
of 61.
1961. Just 6 months later or so, you have Spider-Man, and this is a book that's about to be canceled, right? The last issue of Amazing Fantasy. And so they wanted to try out a character, and I'm not going to go through, Stan Lee's retelling of how he came up with Spider-Man, but launched the character Spider-Man, and of course was very popular. And of course, Spider-Man #1, you have that mixture of the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man together right there on the cover. And then, you just had DC controlled the distribution of Marvel Comics at that time. So I think they could only do 7 or 9 books a month. I think originally 7, then they upped it to 9 near the end of the.
I think, Shelby, that was actually slightly later in the Silver Age. It happened because, for example, like in 68, they're publishing Tales of Suspense, and they have to alternate between half the book is Captain America and half of it is Iron Man, right? But at any rate, Ground Zero. Ground Zero is Fantastic Four #1. For many years, that book was more valuable than Amazing Fantasy #15, just because it was earlier and it was really ground zero of establishing the Marvel Universe. However, Spider-Man just continues to grow in popularity and is clearly eclipsed the Fantastic Four. And Amazing Fantasy #15 is now the Silver Age book. Period. It's the most valuable by a long margin, by a big margin, Silver Age book, including the books that are rarer and earlier from DC. And that is just because the demand is so much higher. That said, here's our census. The supply is frankly plentiful. We have 2,589 copies in Universal. Darn near 4,000 copies, all grades. I mean, that's a lot of copies to go around in terms of for collectors, right? And so to keep the prices of this book as high as they are, demand is very serious. So we have a lot of demand for this book. As we mentioned, August of 1962, they took a flyer on this one and they said, well, we'll see how the sales come back in. In those days, they would send the books out. And of course, they write them way in advance. They print them, they send them out. And what would happen is the newsstand takes that inventory in, only has to pay them for the ones they sell. They rip the covers off, or they send the rest of the book back in, and they get refunded the rest of the book. That process takes a couple months. So they don't really know if the book did well until really the end of, actually, I guess it's probably around October or so of 62, because although this is cover dated August 62, it really is coming out in when, like, June or July, I think, in terms of when it hits the newsstand. So anyway,
Anyway, it is about a 3-month process
Yeah.
between hitting the stands, getting numbers back, and things like that. And then, really quick, the distribution of DC distributing Marvel was from 1957 to 1968.
it was that entire period. Okay, thank you.
It
I
was.
appreciate the
I thought
correction.
it was.
Yeah.
But I just had to make sure I wasn't crazy because I get a lot of things up in my
Yeah,
head.
I mean, and that distribution, those agreements changed back and forth, and it
Yeah.
might be that they were distributing the whole time, but maybe I'm remembering that they didn't limit them to 8 books until later in the Silver Age. So that could also be still kind of true. But
Yeah.
that's great to know. Thank you again. I appreciate the correction. So it wasn't until months later they realized what a huge hit they had on their hands, and they launched Spider-Man #1. So that's kind of the story. Everybody knows, I think almost everybody knows, this is the story. It was an anthology book. So there's just one short story here on Peter Parker. And it is the first appearance and origin of Peter Parker and Spider-Man, Aunt May, Uncle Ben. And this is, with great power comes great responsibility. And it's really, I don't know, is it just hands down the best Silver Age origin story? Is there anything that even comes close?
I mean, I just got chills whenever you said that, because that's the last words in the very last panel, I believe. And you have a youth that is, picked on, is teased at school. He suddenly gets superpowers, and what does he do? He, for good or bad,
he flubs up,
tries to cash in, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh wow, now I can afford, go out, make money, afford that new camera or whatever, right? And there may have been some altruism in there of helping out the aunt and uncle. I don't quite remember, but then he got screwed over by the promoter, and when they got robbed, selfishly he let the bandit run away, and then that same person ended up killing his uncle. And I mean, come on.
Powerful stuff.
Powerful, and all that in like 5 or 6 pages.
It's a very short story. Yeah. They had to be efficient.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, like I said, not a super rare book, but obviously a very important book. Oh yeah, we should give a spoiler warning. Sorry about that, everybody.
And John said he got his first Spider-Man book 60 years ago. Oh my God.
Wow.
That's older than you and I, Paul.
That had to be
not together, but that is older than us. Yeah.
That had to be a very issue of Amazing, right? Amazing launches
in an early one, yeah.
In 63? Early 63?
That's what I'd have to say, 63 or 64.
Yeah, wow. That's probably still a Steve Ditko book.
Sure.
So ordinarily we have to do our Universal by picking a recent sale, but it turns out, again, because there's so many more of this book in the market than there are, most of the Golden Age books we talk about. There were 9 sales of this book in Universal 5.0 in the trailing 12 months. So this is a summary of the data. So rather than showing you an individual book, this is better. This is the average data, and we have outliers, highs and lows, and everything. I'll cover it all here in one graph. So let's go over this. 5.0 is actually, because, and I didn't mention it on the previous slide, but let's actually look at this population distribution real quick. Median grade is a somewhat abysmal 3.5, and you see this big bolus in the census at 0.5. A lot of these are remaindered copies. Frankly, they're actually stolen copies, right? These are the ones that they said they sent back to the distributor, got their money back, but then they snuck them out the back door and sold them for a couple pennies.
I remember there was a grocery store that would bag them up together in like a produce bag of 10 or something for like 25 cents. and
Yeah.
they had the covers ripped off. So
Yeah, exactly. So they weren't supposed to do that. Again, they're technically stolen books, but there's a lot of that material in the marketplace. And for some people, that's the only copy they can afford. That's the entry level copy. So that's a disproportionately large number of the 0.5s are those remaindered books. And then, otherwise you see sort of a Gaussian distribution here, but really a low end on the curve. Median grade of 3.5 is quite low. In fact, for golden age books, we often see a median grade more like 5 or 6 or even as high as 7. So that said, the grade 5.0 is actually the top 23%. So 5.50 is not that high of a grade. That's the top quartile for this book because so many copies are in low grade, right? So that's kind of neat. So you're buying into the top quartile. That's always good in terms of, a collectible that might have a blue chip like this that might have the ability to appreciate. You want to buy up the population census as high as you can afford to. So top 23% is impressive. In terms of these 9 sales over the trailing 12 months, the average 1 year is 51,787. The fair market value they have at 46 because the average is a bit skewed by a couple high sales. The low sale for the trailing 12 months is 38,400. The high sale, 69,601. By the way, all-time record high for this book in this grade, 84,000. So the individual that purchased a copy this year for 38,400 literally bought it half off the market peak. And you can see in the graph here, this book really took off around 2017. I assume that's the release of some Spider-Man movies.
That's what I was about to say. I'm assuming that bump around 2016, 2017 was a Spider-Man movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would have to think.
And then it took a breather, although it took a breather at a much higher price level because it had appreciated through that period quite a bit. And then, of course, it took off during the pandemic again. And it's taken another breather, but again, at a higher price level than the last time. So it can fall off of highs, but it tends to ratchet up and not hit new lows, right? So it hits new highs and it can sell off, but it never quite hits new lows. It's always on the long trajectory of this book has always been upward.
No, I think the rebound from the pandemic is really settling some of the prices at slightly higher than what we saw pre-pandemic. And
absolutely,
it's a great indicator.
Yeah,
so.
It's a great book, and blue chip for sure.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, if you bought it at that market high, you might be sad today, but I don't think you're sad in 20 years.
Oh, for sure.
So with that as the background, 46,000. Here's our book. A Conserved 5.0. Really a beautiful book. So interestingly, interior art in this story by Steve Ditko, but this cover is a Jack Kirby cover.
Yep.
And one of his best ever.
I would have to say so. Just the angle. I mean, look at the tilting of the buildings and just the strength that's shown of him, swinging and holding, the bad guy. It's so much is said with just so little. I mean, it's an amazing. And I would love to see what Ditko's cover looked like. It's
out there. It's
out there. I know, and I can't remember it off the top of my head.
It just wasn't quite heroic enough.
It wasn't heroic enough for Stan Lee, so he asked Jack to redraw it, and it's not even what you think of a lot is a Jack Kirby style almost, right? There's so many soft lines to the Spider-Man physique that you just didn't normally see with Kirby, I don't think. So it's definitely an exceptional piece.
Oh yeah. So let's get into the graders notes here. off-white pages. This one was graded in mid 2023, so basically probably prepped to sail. Conserved, obviously. Cover and interior reinforced, piece reattached to cover. This is good use of conservation, in my opinion, but let's go into the specifics of the grader notes. Chip out left bottom of front cover. That's a relatively small chip at the bottom of the building.
Yeah, right under the guy's hand.
Spine split, top of spine. So interestingly, they didn't correct this spine split. Tanning interior cover. They didn't attempt to remove the tanning. Centerfold reinforced, probably a pop centerfold that they were able to reattach. Creasing to cover, can't do much about that. Interior front cover and interior spine reinforced. So why somebody reinforced the interior of the spine but left a spine split at the top is interesting, unless there was some material missing and they didn't want to bridge it.
That could be it. We see that a lot with the books and stuff. And really quick, Peter made a comment about only 12 conserved grades.
Yeah.
I wouldn't stick this book in water. There is no way with what I've seen with Silver Age books that I would ever attempt an aqueous bath. So you're 100% right. I think they conserved it the right way, just through mending and probably did a good dry clean or something like that with it.
Mm-hmm.
John Sacramardo has been sharing his whole story about Spider-Man #7 was the first one. And I'll give a quick anecdote. He talked about the 80s just a moment ago. I actually owned an Amazing Fantasy 15 for about 10 minutes once.
Ooh.
In the late 80s.
You had to pay the rent.
In the late 80s. No, I was at a show in Austin. It was his old toy show that used to be in Austin. And they had comic books and stuff. And I was standing there at a dealer's table, and he said, and we was getting along and talking, and he said, will you do me a favor? That guy over there has an Amazing Fantasy 15 for $100. He won't sell it to me, but I want to use it as a giveaway. Will you go buy it for me and bring it back? And he gave me the $100. And this book was trash, dude. I think there were tire tracks on it. Mud and everything else. But I went over and bought the book for the guy, brought it back, and gave it to him. So I owned an Amazing Fantasy for about 10 minutes.
I have an Amazing Fantasy 15 story that is not quite as fun as that. It's a bit more like depressing, but
is it a Halloween story? Is it depressing?
No. It's only depressing for me. You get to laugh at me. So when it was actually 1984, the summer of 1984,
okay.
I lived in rural mid-Michigan, and we didn't have any comic book shops prior to that. And that summer was kind of that independent boom that was ushered in by Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And there started to be a real growth in the industry, and we got a comic book shop. And the proprietor of the shop got in a copy of Amazing Fantasy 15. As you're discussing, it was very low grade, right? But it was, as far as I remember, it was complete. It was all there. It was in a bag. The bag was pinned to a cork board behind him. So it was a wall book. And he wanted $90 for it.
Oh my God.
And at the time, I was collecting bottles and cans and returning them for their 10-cent deposit in the state of Michigan to buy comic books, 75 cents or $1 at a time. And it seemed like just a bridge too far to spend $90 on a comic, right?
Enormous, yeah.
That said, I can go back and look at all the books I bought from that summer. And again, this was the summer of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles dropping. So you had geriatric jujitsu gerbils.
Yeah.
You had radioactive kung fu rodents.
Yeah.
I bought all of them. And I am positive that if you added all that up, it well exceeds $90. And of course, all those books today are completely worthless. And
I agree.
a 2.0 copy of Amazing Fantasy 15 is worth 25 grand, 20 to 25
I
grand.
would think so. Yeah.
So it isn't even like I thought about it, to be frank. If I had said, oh, I took it off the wall and I looked at it, but I thought, better of it. I didn't even consider it. That's as close as I've ever been. I was in the presence of it, and I technically spent more money than that book would have cost me. That's as close as I've ever been to buying the book.
But all those things is relative, right? I mean, because that was a lot of money back then.
That was an incredible amount of money.
That was an incredible amount of money. I mean, today, you and I would, sneeze and at dropping 100 bones on something, but
so let's get back to the book.
Sorry,
the last no, that's okay. I mean, I think that's what the show's about.
See if there was something.
Piece reattached, top left front cover. I think that's that little piece that you see right above the A, parallel with the edge, the left edge of the A, actually.
Yeah.
I think that's where that piece was removed. And then it's actually, this is probably the best use of conservation, because of that piece missing, the technical grade of this book drops a lot. So you can almost conserve this book for free here, in terms of you're not going to pay a penalty because you're picking up so much equity by reattaching that piece. Spines, stress lines to cover. Again, can't do much about that. Staple tears. Again, it's a little bewildering that you have reinforced the centerfold, but still have staple tears somewhere. But, I don't like to, it's hard to second guess the person doing the work. So,
I mean, unless they didn't want to remove the cover. That's the only thing I could think. Is there some kind of, because it doesn't say spine reinforced, it says cover and interior reinforced. So I could think they didn't want to remove the cover, is all I could think of.
Yeah.
And if you ever touch some of these books from this era, they're like toilet paper. In some cases.
It's cheap paper for sure.
So thin.
Though this one does have nice page quality at Off-White. That's pretty good for this book.
Yeah.
And then lastly, where all corners of cover, of course, we can see they're a little rounded off here. But really, overall, a beautiful presenting copy. I mean, you're not gonna sneeze at this book.
No.
It's a nice looking copy. This is a very nice presenting 5.0. I've definitely seen worse looking. I think it presents well for the grade.
Yeah.
And again, it's top quartile in the census. Yeah. I didn't give you an opportunity to guess, but here's what the hammer fell for. So 2 weeks ago, $24,000. And we said Universal was 46. So 52% of the Universal on this book.
Y'all keep that percentage in mind when we start talking about some of these other books here in a moment.
For me, this was very well bought.
Oh my God. For the little bit of conservation that was done. I mean, it's not a cover wash. Come on. You just have a little bit of, I'm assuming, Tengujo and
yeah, absolutely. So as a matter of fact, let's do this game. Would you rather? Here is a Amazing Fantasy 15 in 2.5. This is just an example book. I know what this one actually hammered for, but again, we don't have to use an individual book. We can, because this book trades hands regularly in public markets, so we actually know what it sells for. But these are the kinds of defects that are resident in a 2.5. Full length creases, center front cover, staples detached from the cover. So this cover is just loose. Light chews, right bottom of the entire book is chewed through. You can see in that bottom right corner. it just doesn't present nearly as well as that 5.0, right? There's
Yeah.
a
Sorry, I was
big
pumped.
gap. Page quality is lower. This particular book hammered for 26.5, so about $2,000 more than our 5.0 conserved. And the average for 2.5s, the range for 2.5s, for most of them will sell between 20 and 25,000. This was actually a particularly high hammer price. This actually, I should say, this wasn't a hammer price. This was fixed price on eBay. This was a buy it now for 26.5. When you look at the auction prices for books that start with, like $1 starting bids, and those, which really to me is more the true fair market value, although obviously a buyer stepped up for this right here. Those books tend to be between 20 and 25 grand for a 2.5. So essentially the same amount of money here, right? Within the margin of error in terms of the averages, within the deviation of the averages. Look at the difference in paper quality. Look at the the number of defects on the book on the left, the fragility, how much closer to its end life it is in terms of being, the much darker paper with much more tanning.
Yeah.
For me, this is like not even close.
I was about to say, you better not even ask me, because the 2.5 has all your classic Marvel issues, the creasing, the chipping, the spine wear shows so easily with these early Marvel books and such. So given what little bit of restoration was done, this book has a ton of originality, meaning the 5.0, right? Oh my God.
Right.
Don't get me started, Paul. Don't get me started.
So I think this just speaks to what a good deal the 5.0 was. I mean, if somebody said to me, how much more would you expect to pay for this 5.0 conserved of this 2.5? I would say plus 50% ish. So if that book on the left is 20 to 25 grand, I'd expect to pay 30 to 35 for the Amazing Fantasy 15 and 5.0 conserved. The fact that these traded hands in the last year for essentially the same price makes this to me a very easy decision, and I think probably everyone here agrees. So but I hope you enjoyed that segment. I thought that was a lot of fun. I think it brings up some interesting questions about what the value of these books are, how it's driven by supply and demand, and how collectors value conserved books in the marketplace.
Exactly. And you and I could talk on that topic for the rest of the night if we wanted to.
Right.
Though I think that's part of our manifesto, if you were,
right,
of having a channel like this where we have these discussions weekly about conservation, where we show our process of conserving, where we you have your channel, I have my channel, Larry, Jerry, we're trying to bring this idea of conservation more to the public, where it's, and I hate to say looked down upon, but I think what what Jason or Peter one just said a minute ago, is people are still uneducated at the difference between those two things.
Yeah, and that's part of what we're trying to do. That's a big part of what we're trying to do. Just bring it to the masses and educate people on it. Not even educate, just expose them to it.
Exactly.
John Scamardo says, if the book has been stabilized to some extent, cleaned, I would rather have that one than the one that will continue to degrade even in the plastic box. This is actually, and I didn't say it expressly, but this is a big part of why I think the 5.0 is just a better book. You take those two books 20, 40 years from now, and one is going to continue to accelerate its degradation, and one is going to be fairly stable. That's the other reason why, I'm thinking about I'm in my 50s. I'm thinking about generational wealth. I'm thinking about what's going to happen to these assets when I'm gone, right? I'm thinking about my heirs less than I am about myself, right?
I'm still trying to
I'm just a
predict when I'm going to
caretaker.
die, and I can sell everything about 6 months before and
Just
go
then.
live on an island somewhere. But so John also asked a few moments ago about he's got a bunch of books from the 40s, and that
I'll
is our
pull it up.
speciality. Definitely check out some of the videos on my channel, and you know, those people I just named, myself, Paul, which is this channel, and my channel, Shelby's Comics. You know, go give me a little sub. And yeah, that is our specialty. I think you're part of our Facebook group. I think I actually accepted you. Yeah, send questions, send us messages. We're happy to talk.
The Golden Age books are made of better material, frankly. They have a lot more permanence to the paper. They're much easier to work on. You'll notice actually a lot of people will only work on those in terms of heavy conservation work because it's just not worth it to work on this. The Silver Age books are there's so many in the census, and you sometimes just roll the dice in terms of how the paper is going to react to some of the interventions.
I just told you a story the other night about my mystery tales, you know, which that video will be coming out in a couple of weeks, so y'all can see. I always show you the good and the bad.
I try to work all the bad out first and then just show you my process when it's done. It takes me a bit longer, but that's my process. Well, without any further ado, let's jump into this segment here.
Oh my God,
the Chris Farrell collection that we're so excited about. Some big books.
Oh my God, big books. And I only grabbed, so Heritage had a press release kit, and I just grabbed some images from that press release kit, put on this first page. But you can see several restored books that she's had in her collection, which I wouldn't sneeze at any of these. Action Comics #1, All-Star Comics #3. Oh my God. That All Flash #6. I'm drooling. We'll take a little bit. I'm not going to do spoilers. Flash Comics #1. Look at that.
Big
and that is a Universal 5.0.
These are the books we've been talking about. My personal copy of All Star #3 is also restored. It's in the hands of one Kenny Sanderson at the moment, but we'll be going to CGC soon. We got fingers crossed to get a grade close to Chris's here, so we'll see how that works out.
Paul has all of them, Jason. No, he doesn't.
Oh, how many of these do I have? I have only the one, but that's an interesting story. We could do a segment on this. I don't know how many people are subscribers to Go Collect. That's the service that I use. Some people use the other one that also has a G in it. GPA.
Oh, yeah.
And they're very similar services. I just happen to use Go Collect. Go Collect has a big boy blue chip. So Go Collect does something really cool. They basically have stock market indices, but for comic books. So they have comic book indices. So just like we have the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and we have the S&P 500, and we have the Russell 3000, and et cetera, and we have the NASDAQ, the exchanges, they have a Golden Age index, a Silver Age index, a Bronze Age index, copper, modern, and then they have one that's a blue chip. I think they call it Big Boy. I don't know. That's sexist. Right? I don't think they call it Big Boy. They do call it the big britches books, and we should go over that. I want to say there's approximately like 35 big britches books, and I own not half of them, but I own a good chunk of them.
So, I have most of these, but they're in the DC Treasury size from the 70s.
Yeah, that's how we collect. That's how we roll. All right, let's get into it. Let's get into it.
throw a little bit of history at you because I didn't even we didn't, right? This whenever Paul and I were talking, never heard of the person, never heard of her and this collection. So you can jump over to the next slide.
Oh yeah.
So Christine Farrell, this is a great article from 1983, and I'll actually show it in a second. But they described her as comic craze collector. She's from Burlington, Vermont, and lives in a land. I love this quote. Lives in a land of simple truths where swashbuckling heroes match wits with the world's most cunning criminals.
You missed one alliteration.
Did I?
Yeah. It was supposed to be swashbuckling superheroes, so that then you could do cunning criminals.
Sorry.
Too many alliterations.
I've got it over here on my side.
No, that's okay.
But yeah, she began collecting as a child. And we need these books. We need these books. I mean, if we're going to bring in some female audience and stuff, the Lois Lane, the Supergirls. And in 1970, she decided to start collecting the entire run of DC Comics, starting with New Fun Comics #1 in 1935. She completed her collection in 2007 by finally getting a copy, and I've never even heard of this. It's a joke book, but the Fat and Slap joke book from 1944. If you wonder how she could afford this, she's rich. Her family founded, oh my God, Jack. Her family founded the
Farrell Distribution Empire.
Thank you, Farrell Distribution Empire. That started in 1933, and then it really burst into prominence during being a alcohol distributor after Prohibition. So old money, but she could afford this. She did own a store. I didn't know that, and it was not in the heritage auction write-up. But when I did some of my research on this topic, she did own a store called Prime Earth Comics. See, they're right there, tells you her love for DC Comics, right?
Earth Prime, it was called.
Earth Prime. I'm sorry, I have a Jack in my face.
And I think if you look at this picture, this is her booth at a con.
At a New York Comic Con, I believe.
You look at the background, and she financed buying all those DC books by selling all those timelys.
See that Daredevil battles Hitler right behind her, the Adventure Comics, the Marvel Mystery Comics, the Captain America, the Flash Comics. Oh my God, I was drooling at this picture.
Incredible. All right. Here's that article you mentioned.
Here's the article, and if you notice, this from 1983, and she has these books down at her feet. Superman #1, Batman, Action, and etc. And so what was mentioned in one of the articles I read is, she amassed all this through traditional means, right? She'd been doing this from the 70s, visiting comic stores, attending conventions, networking with collectors, right? I remember being in the back of the Comic Buyer's Guide and Comic Book Marketplace, and that's what you did, is you sent letters and things like that. Every now and then you'd have a phone number. But she had rare issues. I mentioned the Fat and Slap, but also Girls Love Stories #56. And she had the canceled comic Cavalcade. Oh my God. If y'all don't know what that is, that's from the late 70s, where DC slashed about a half to 2/3 of their books. And so what they did is they bound up all the remaining stories that were never published into 2 volumes to give away to people within the DC offices. So there's only about 35 known copies of this. And it has, I know one thing that's in there is like the last story for, I'm not going to think of it. You probably know better than I do, Paul. You're more of a DC
I do
person.
not. my knowledge mostly ends at the last issue of All Star in 1951. So,
Okay.
in terms of my
So,
DC lore, then I
yeah,
pick
so
up Marvel lore.
there are a few Kirby things in there and Ditko things. I know that, and
Oh,
the
from
name escapes
probably the
me.
last Fourth World stories.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
All right. Well, we got a lot of books to get
So
through, so let's
yeah,
move.
so she passed away
Oh,
in just
sorry.
recently in April. So just to kind of give us next slide, you can go ahead. So they did put up one of her books for auction already in September. This New Comics #1, which I love the Shirley Temple advertisement on the back, and you can see that there's a total of only 23 graded, 6.5 conserved, and went for $78,000. Now, one of the things $7,800. Thank you. Now, one of the things you're going to see with some of these books I'm going to show is there is no fair market value,
right?
Because they just do not show up.
No,
nothing has been sold. They just do not show up.
Too
so
rare.
There was no fair market value for this book.
Yeah, too rare, and the whales that have them in their collections are not. They're just not letting go of them.
No,
until they pass away.
Exactly. Yep. All right, so guess the price. We're going to show you some info on now. These auctions end in 5 days. I did have the date of the auctions on that other slide.
Right. So this is an upcoming heritage auction featuring.
It is. It's open for bids now. It's open for bids right now. So, right. All right, and I kind of picked and choose like the order. So I picked them and chose them from my feeling of, interesting and having some provenance in terms of historical value up to the most important. So this is completely my ranking of where I put these. I did not include the non-superhero. This is the only non-superhero cover book that I am including. There are several other conserved books that fall into that category. Some detectives that have that have Batman stories, but no Batman cover, for example.
Sure.
This one is a non-hero cover book, unless you think of Hawkman there, the little circle. But oh my God, Gardner Fox, Flash Comics #3. Oh my God. And you're going to see a trend here in terms of what CGC considered conservation. So the only conservation here, cover reinforced.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
Ironically,
had it been taped, it would be considered universal, but it would be ruined in my eyes.
Very true.
So Flash Comics 3, very early pre-war. We're talking here, before All-Star 1.
Yep.
Really early superhero era, though. And it's an anthology book, of course. There is a Flash story in the book, and also a Sheldon Moldoff Hawkman story in this book, The Whip, and then the King, and then of course this is the introduction of King Standish, who doesn't end up being all that important for DC continuity, but nevertheless is here. Incredibly rare book. If you're trying to do a full run of Flash Comics, I mean, these are some of the books that are just going to be so difficult to find, right? It's
so hard.
Forget about finding them in high grade. So last two sales here from 2014 in a 7.0 and 2018 in an 8.0, spanning $1,500 up to $5,400. Exactly. So we have no idea.
I would look, there's going to be a couple of caveats that I'll go ahead and say first. There is what I think it should be worth given the minor amount of conservation that is on most of these books. But I'm concerned given the trend that we've seen in the values that conserved books have realized.
Sure.
So there are two numbers that are in my head, right? Is I feel that this book should sell the same as the Universal. That's just me. The conservation is so minor. It actually helped it helps the book, right, in terms of preservation. But I mean, the public will speak, right, in
Right.
about 5 days.
Well, I'll go ahead and I'll just put something out there, and we'll see how close I am in the end. I'm gonna say a universal of this book is between 5 grand and 7,500. And then
Yeah.
I think this is gonna sell at a discount to that, but not a huge discount. So I'm gonna say I think this hammers between 3,500 and 5 grand. That's what I think. And I know that's still kind of a big range, but we just have no idea on these books.
No, and you're really close to what I was thinking. I was thinking Universal is probably around 7,000,
Mhm.
and I would love to see around 4,000 realized for this book, and I hope it does. I hope it gets closer to 7,000, but
I think it's not, only because we don't have a major superhero cover. You got a nice
that's true.
Sheldon Waldoff cover,
That's
but
true.
it's not featuring his signature character, which is Hawkman, prominently. And so
Yeah,
I think that's where it's going. Well, we'll see. We'll see.
we'll see.
Next book up.
Oh, I love
And
this
they
cover.
do get bigger and more
They
exciting.
get bigger.
Right?
They get
Yeah.
bigger. Don't worry. I love this cover. This is why, even though in terms of monetary value, it's not up there with the Flash comics, this does have a superhero cover. It has Speedy and the Green Arrow, Gardner Fox again, Cliff Young cover and art. This is from 1943, so right in the middle of the war. And right now, I looked it up right before the show. This thing right now has only a bid of $110 on it.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
So,
I mean, a lot will happen in the last few
of
days and
course,
minutes, but so you didn't mention it, but the title is More Fun. It's More Fun number 90. This is
Yep.
one of DC's oldest titles, so it was
Yep.
already in issue 27 or 30 when Action 1 was published, but at the time it was Funny Books. This is the title from which they launched the Spectre and Dr. Fate and a number of other characters. And we're going to see one of those in a little bit. But at this point in time, interestingly, one of the things that happened during the period between the Golden and the Silver Ages, very few superheroes were being published. DC still had their big three being published: Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. Sometimes people forget that Aquaman and Green Arrow were also both published through that period. They just didn't have their own titles, so they were published in anthologies. So More Fun published Green Arrow stories all the way through, which is why we don't have a big relaunch of the Silver Age Green Arrow, because he was contiguous all the way through.
Yeah.
But
I would love to have some More Fun comics in my collection. I just love their covers. I love the logo at that tilt and the font and everything.
That I'm a big fan. Yeah, I'm a big fan of More Fun, especially the Spectre covers. I'm actually personally collecting the Spectre and Dr. Fate covers. That's where my sort of big interest in this title comes from.
Yeah. So again, we see this trend: very, very, very minor conservation, cover and centerfold reinforced and cover cleaned. Yeah. Let me go ahead and say this: cover cleaned is going to be a theme with all these conserved books. Sure. And I'm not sure if it, again, we could have a whole conversation on if cover cleaning is actually, whatever, right? I mean, whatever. I mean, we know that someone actually just posted was it a Green Lantern book in the Facebook group where they obviously did a cover cleaning because they removed a stain, and it came back a 9.8 Universal. We know cover cleaning occurs and is missed by CGC, and you get Universal grades. So I'm not sure if there's something that is showing on the cover or not showing that tips them to cover cleaning. But what I'm really thinking is that when CGC got these books, is they sent it through their own cleaning and pressing group, and thus it automatically got that conserve grade because they knew it had been cleaned. That is my
Interesting.
guess. I don't know though.
Yeah. So with only 14 copies Universal, the last sale of a 9.0 Universal was in 2005, almost 20 years ago. And that was for $1,150. I'm guessing that you think this is going to sell for a lot more than that.
I struggled. I struggled today trying to think about what a number would be for this. I'm going to go out on a limb and say if a Universal 9.0 should probably sell for around at least 8,000. I mean, you're a little better at this. You're a little better at this because it's DC and Golden Age.
I'm going to pull it back a little bit and say $5,000 to $7,500 again on this one.
Really?
And the reason why is because you have, how many issues are there? About
of More Fun.
You got about 40 issues of somewhat generic Green Arrow and Speedy covers. And so they tend to be fairly interchangeable in terms of what people collect.
Okay.
And they just do not sell for, the Spectre only has 12 covers and Dr. Fate only has 9, right? Those More Funs are earlier, and they're not rarer on an absolute scale, but they're more sought after and they go for higher dollars. Yep. So I would pull it back just a little bit from there. And then it's anybody's guess how much of a discount to put because it's conserved. I mean, I could definitely see this book hammering at $5,000, but I feel like it's going to go for less than that. I'm going to put this in the same bin as the other one in terms of what I think the hammer price would be. I'm going to say $3,500 to $5,000, but I also wouldn't be shocked if it sold for less because at 9.0 conserved is where you start to see people balk at the prices because they're just a little bit twitchy about it being conserved. So
I agree.
Somebody might steal this one.
I'm thinking this might go in the $3,000 range. I would love to see it get a little more. And I'll have to admit, I'm a little bit biased. I love the cover. And you know that I personally love any of the wartime books that say anything about bonds and stamps. That I have a small handful of those books, and it's something I gravitate towards. So. Something
else interesting. I mean, we think about the Golden Age as more or less coincident with the World War II, but More Fun is such an early publication. It's already on issue 90 in 1943, which is just incredible. All right. Well, good luck to that one.
Oh, Starman. Come on. What can you say?
Is Starman still here? Adventure. We got
Isn't that Starman on the cover?
Yeah. Adventure Comics 72 from March of 1942. 8.0 white pages conserved. Conservation includes cover reinforced, cover cleaned, interior lightened. What did we find in terms of, the Universal is only 24 copies in the census. So another one of these really rare books. Now, not nearly as sought after. This is not a big key book.
No, and if you look at the data, on top, like there's several high grade copies in Universal, right? I see some 9s, I see some 9.2s. Only 2, of course, but there's a few out there. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I should say it is a key in that it's the first Simon and Kirby work together for DC. And so that's important to some people. I don't know exactly what that means in the marketplace, but it's not a character first appearance, right?
No, but I love the Starman cover. Again, I'm probably a little biased on this one of like the machinery, the Starman on the cover. It called to me. So
it is a beautiful cover.
It's a beautiful cover. And again, the conservation, cover reinforced, cleaned, interior lightened. That one threw me off a little bit of how that was accomplished. Because I doubt they took the book apart. So I'm not positive. So I am a little mystified on this.
I'm actually questioning what I said earlier, and maybe I need to. I'm going to just point out that I could be dead wrong. Maybe this is the first appearance of the new purple and yellow Sandman.
Oh, might be. Oh,
But,
yeah, it says
but
the Sandman.
CGC doesn't say it on the
No.
label, so I'm not 100% sure about that. So
No.
I'll happily be wrong if I get corrected on that. But
Yeah.
beautiful cover, love the composition, love the large adventure comic logo trade dress, love Starman.
Yeah.
Would love to have this book. So
yeah.
where do
The
we
DC
think?
logo in yellow, it's amazing.
So
So
a
I
9.0
included
sold
I
in
included the
2019 for
9.0 because that
$9,000.
happened only 5 years ago compared to the 8.5 and 7.5, because this book is an 8.0. It falls in between the 8.5 and 7.5, but the 8.5 sold in 2008 and the 7.5
Wow.
sold in 2014. And so I don't think you could take an average of those two and come up with that number.
No.
When just 5 years ago you had a 0.5 increase, right, from 8.5 to 9.0, jump almost $3,000, $3,500, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I'm guessing some Simon and Kirby fans are gonna come.
Yeah.
They're gonna probably come at this hard. Actually, I'm taking back what I said about it not being a key book. I think people are gonna come at this hard because of that. And I think with 24 Universal in the census and only one conserved, this could be a sleeper book that really has a high hammer price. Yeah, I could see that happening.
I could too. I could too. I'm thinking a Universal. I would love to say about 8,000. I would like to say even conserved, it's going to hit close to what that 8.5 did, right around 6,000. But I could be completely off base.
I tend to agree with you. I'll probably discount it a little bit more, but I also would think the Universal might sell for more than what you're guessing. So I'm going to end up around the same place.
True.
Yeah.
Right.
Beautiful book, man. We'll be watching that one.
Y'all get your tissues ready for this one. Another more fun topic, number 73. Dr. Fate on the cover. Oh my God. Talk about it. Talk about it.
Big book. Okay. More Fun Comics 73. This is November 1941. And it's a 7.0, off-white to white pages, conserved, as we said, just graded earlier this year. The big deal here is it's the first appearance of Aquaman. It's also the first appearance of Green Arrow and Speedy. We've talked about this book before. This is a big book, and this is a rare book. We're talking sub 50 copies rarity. You know, this if this had Aquaman and Green Arrow on the cover, this would be up there with, we'd be in the same conversation with Action 1, Tech 27, Flash 1, those books, because one of the big things holding this back is that neither of these guys are on the cover, but it's a huge book. There's a lot of demand for it, and there's very low supplies. So these are big book. This is a big book, and it hammers for big prices. You got to be a whale to be looking at this book.
I mean, you got the Spectre, you got Dr. Fate, you got Aquaman, Green Arrow, Speedy. Oh my God, all of this together. Conservation includes tear seals to the cover, and I think we can see that over near the top corner where the spine is. You can see some chippage. Spine split sealed to the cover, so I'm betting that is also up there. Cover reinforced. I'm assuming it's all in that same area up there at that top corner. I'm betting
this is going to be an interesting book to watch.
So
now this is actually we've had a few sales in this grade in Universal in the last year.
We have. So this is one of the first ones that we actually got a fair market value from Go Collect on. So I included also the 7.5 because that sale happened in 2001. The sales for the 7.0 happened a longer time ago. So the fair market value of the 7.0 is really driven more by the more current sales, right? If you notice that the 7.0 is actually fair market value is higher than the last sold price for the 7.5.
Yep.
So Go Collect's fair market value is driven more by the higher recent sales of the 7.580 and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So now, since we do know a fair market value of $115,000, which is more than what my house cost. What are you thinking? I mean, conserved. Again, I think it's moderate conservation. I don't think that.
Yeah.
It doesn't say cover cleaned on this one for some reason. So,
wow. I think it's going to be difficult for somebody to pay over 50 grand for this. I think they're just going to have a hard time paying 50 grand for a conserved book. So I think it's going to stall out there. And that's what that's my prediction. And of course, I wouldn't be shocked if it sold for 80, nor would I be, I think it would be crazy if it sold for only like 30.
yeah,
But I think it could go anywhere in that whole range. There's so much volatility in the pricing of conserved books still today. So, but I think it's likely that somebody's going to convince themselves that they can bid 50 grand. They can hold their paddle up for 50. And I think it's going to be tough for anybody to get much above that. You might see somebody go, I'll go 51 just to try for a knockout blow. But I think it's going to have a hard time getting much past 50. That's my prediction.
I have the same gut feeling. I would love to see it get 60 to 80 because I think it deserves that with all the.
And it could. I mean, there's that one
conservation is.
Yeah, we saw that Action 1 conserved copy that sold for over $1 million. I mean, it could happen. I'll be interesting. Wow, what a big book.
Great book. Love this
is fun.
You and I talked about this. Leading Comics, #1. You got everybody on here. You got Star Spangled Kid, Crimson Avenger, Green Arrow, The Vigilante, Shining Knight. It's just a great book. One of these quarterly books, right? It says Winter of 1941. Go ahead.
Second superhero team of all time after Justice Society of America. Also, one important thing to note about this book, we talked about the previous book is the first appearance of Green Arrow, but he's not on the cover. He's on the cover of this. This is Green Arrow's first cover appearance. So pretty important book. Not as sought after as you might think. Leading Comics. So Leading Comics is superhero stories, the 7 Soldiers of Victory through the first, I want to say 14 issues, maybe it's 17, something like that. After that, it becomes a Funny Animal title, and it continues on through the end of the Golden Age as a Funny Animal title, and then it eventually, fades into history. There are folks who collect just the first issues, the superhero issues, and for those folks, the census on these relatively small. This is the highest in census at 49. They drop off after that dramatically. They tend to just, again, not trade hands, not be quite as sought after as, say, All-Star, but I love this title. It's got some amazing covers too.
Yeah.
It's got
and
some
you don't
really
see them very
incredible
often.
covers.
Yeah.
I will I'll give you a little teaser, Shell, because you haven't seen it yet. I'm going to have an unboxing coming up in the future.
Oh my God.
I have one of the Golden Age issues of Leading, one of the superhero issues. It's a 9/6 double cover.
Oh my God. Oh.
And I got it for what I felt was a very, very fair price. Like I said, I think these are books that can sneak by. It's just not a title that people chase as hard as some of the other Golden Age titles.
No. Well, you rarely see them. You rarely see Leading Comics out there.
That's true. Yeah.
So, a theme, Jason, you picked up on it. This is going to be a theme, I think, for most of the remaining books. The only conservation was cover cleaned.
Just cover clean.
And then I don't know. I'm sure it's not a wet cleaning. I'm sure it's a dry cleaning because you and I both, Paul, know what these reds and yellows will do in wet cleaning. And it just does not have that appearance to me.
Well, I'll tell you
It's got to
this.
be dry cleaned.
I'll throw one other possibility out there, and that's this. Remember that Chris put this collection together over 50 years, essentially, right?
Yes.
When she was doing that, there were people doing solvent baths other than water. My guess is
there were.
This is a solvent bath cleaning that left some telltale signs, and it's not a water bath cleaning. It's not an aqueous cleaning, is my guess.
Yeah.
It'd be really interesting to know more about it. But that is my guess for why they say cover cleaned. As I agree with you, it's unlikely it was aqueous.
Right.
But I wouldn't be shocked. In fact, I'm leaning toward, I believe it was a solvent other than water used here. But
so those usually were it was a rod and they dipped it, and a lot of times it's like a shower curtain type of thing, shower rod type of thing. Some of these solvent baths that they would do back then, for those that aren't familiar with that process, and for life, and I can't remember what all was in there and stuff. They did similar for cover reglossing and stuff too back then. So
I think this one is going to bring some nice money.
Yeah, so we have very little information, right? There's no copies sold above a 9.0.
Well, there's only 194 in the census.
There's only 194 on the census, and this isn't it. I don't
194 universal, I should say.
Yeah, it's a 94 universal.
And we don't have any record of it changing hands. My guess is that 94 universal, it would sell for north of 10 grand. It might even hammer
easily,
at 15, 20, somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah. I'm going to guess that this 94 conserved is going to hammer. It's going to hammer around 10 grand. I'll say again, I think 10 grand will be a mental barrier. It's going to be difficult for this book to get beyond that. But I think 8 to 10, this book could see.
I'm going to be a little bit. I'll be a little bit bolder and say 12, but in my heart, I do feel probably closer to what Paul said. And the only reason why is because the 8.5, we do have fair market value of 9,000.
Yeah.
And we are talking 0.9. Am I saying that right? Yeah, 0.9, almost a whole point. Let me say it like that. Almost a whole point more.
Well, put it this way, it's 4 grades higher. You put it this way, it's 4 grades higher, right?
Yeah.
Because you got 9, 9, 2, 9, 4.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I do think that's true. I'll tell you, if this book is, I don't know the exact number. If this book is going to go for less than 5 or 6 grand, I'll have my paddle in there.
There's a couple of these I'm going to keep an eye on that I've already favorited, and I'm getting emails about. Okay.
Yeah.
And
yeah, incredible book. I'd love to have this in my collection of leading comics. So another one. We're super excited to see what happens, and by the time of our next show, we'll know. So that's exciting.
We will. All right.
You know,
I love my patriotic covers. I have a special place in my heart. The world's finest has a lot of great patriotic covers.
I know you love to see Superman with semen.
On that big red S. So we got Superman number 12, 1941, pre-war with Army and Navy guys here. Come on, white cover, beautiful Superman logo, that beautiful yellow background, the step, they're in step together, it's just everything I love about these war covers.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It really is a great patriotic, not the best patriotic, but a great
Oh no, not the
patriotic
best. I mean, the
World
world's
War II
finest
Superman.
patriotic covers beat them quite a bit. But
Yeah. But in terms of Superman being the ultimate Boy Scout type, image, it really fits his image of, where they placed him in the zeitgeist and in the collective consciousness of Americans during this very trying time, right?
yeah,
Arm in arm, locked with our men in uniform at a time when the world was very uncertain. So
yeah.
Superman was a highly published book at the time.
Oh, millions of copies.
At some point actually, exceeded 1 million printed per copy. I don't think it's quite there at number 12, but so Universal 169 copies, 204 all told. And they trade hands a little bit more often. So 2 sales in the last year, established at 8.5 for Universal, establishing the fair market value at 4,600. What do we think on this one?
Well, the only conservation is cover cleaned again. You can even see that little bit of shadow on the spine where I think
Dust
it's
shadow
a
looks
slight.
like, yeah.
I'm not sure if it's dust shadow or a shadow of maybe the spine has a slight roll to it.
No.
Kind of
Could
rolled
be.
up where.
Yeah.
Sadly, I think this is probably going to go for about 2,000. I mean,
I think it could get a little higher because I think the subject matter of the cover is
You
something
think so?
people could get behind.
I would hope
I'm gonna
so.
just say 2,500 to $3,000, a little bit
Okay.
higher,
Okay.
because people love these. Like I said, people love this subject matter. I think that goes a long way.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we'll see, right?
We'll see.
Everybody has the record. We're here. We're going on record here. Oh man. Speaking of great Superman covers.
Early action number 19 from 1939. Man, this is
Yeah.
an early one. Tearing a cannon apart. Great action cover. Classic Schuster art. You can tell his art just immediately. I mean, talk about it, Paul. Talk about it. Oh my God.
Beautiful, beautiful book. Big book. So Action Comics obviously is an anthology. It has a Superman story and then a number of other stories. By the time you settle into, the end of 1939, Superman's well established as the leader. The superhero comic books in general are selling like mad, and everybody's getting in on the action, so to speak. But this title is still the king of comic books, and at that point in time, Action had the best artists, the best storytellers. They had the best covers. This, in terms of a double Superman cover, essentially, where you have Superman in the bullet in the upper left, and then you have such a great, as you said, Schuster cover here in the center. Great strike here. Beautiful, deep, rich colors.
Beautiful deep reds.
This presents incredibly for a 4.0. I want to know why this isn't a 7 or an 8.
Well, the reason why is because of a 2-inch spine split, and there is a 2-inch missing piece on page 19 that slightly affects story. I would have to think, and I know you and I have seen these, it's probably a corner thing, right? Where a 2-inch piece of the corner got ripped off. And it could have been even a factory defect, right? Because sometimes those things don't cut right and they rip.
Sure.
That is what I would think. Oh, and to finish the conversation you and I had before the show, this is the first issue that starts the consecutive Superman story. So, see, I was right where Superman wasn't consecutive prior to this issue.
Well, no, consecutive Superman covers begin. So from here out, they do not have another issue of Action without Superman on the cover. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
we'll look at it.
Actually, also interestingly here, Ultra Humanite appearance. Those of you that like the Justice League of the 80s and even going back into the 60s, but the Ultra Humanite was a recurring supervillain there. That was a lot of fun. I don't know the Golden Age Ultrahumanite as well, but
I don't either.
85 universal in the census, another 24 restored copies, 3 qualified, only 2 conserved. So this is one of only 2 conserved copies, bringing a grand total of only 114 copies all told in the census. This is a rare book. This is an important book. This is a sought after book. This is maybe the pinnacle of Siegel and Schuster.
Yeah.
Enough sales here at 4.0 to give us an estimate of fair market value at $4,000. I'm going to say this book presents so well for a 4.0. I'm going to tell you that I think it's going to hit that $4,000 mark. I don't think there's going to be any discount for it being conserved just because it presents so incredibly. You've seen 4.0s that have chunks out of the cover, lots of creases, lots of color breaking creases, rips, tears, other problems. This doesn't have that. This presents like a 7 or an 8. I think this could exceed the $4,000. That's my prediction here.
I hope so, and I hope people have a discerning eye and read when they see some of these conservation notes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say it's ticky-tacky that just by the cover being clean that it gets thrown into conserved. I mean, that's another whole debate with the prevalence of cleaning and pressing now within our hobby.
Yeah.
But with that being the only conservation to it, I would love to. It'd be a crime if this thing goes for 3,000. I would love to see it go above the 4,000. I would love to.
Yeah. Well, that'll be another exciting one. If the other people aren't raising paddles, I will. Oh.
All right. We got 2 left. You and I was drooling over this before the show.
So, allow me, right?
Please.
So, Action 12, May of 39, cream to off-white pages, 5.5 conserved. Conservation includes cover reinforced, cover clean, staples replaced. Zatara sci-fi cover. First panel ad for Tech 27, of course, the first appearance of Batman. Before we get into it, let's talk about this book in terms of where it sits among collectibles. So Action 1, of course, is the introduction of Superman, has Superman on the cover. But they were alternating Detective Comics and Action Comics every other month. They were featuring either Batman or Superman on the cover, and they were featuring one of the other anthology stories on the cover. The idea was they didn't want Batman and Superman competing against one another. There were technically 2 companies that were co-marketing at the time. And so they made this agreement initially to alternate the covers. So Superman is only on every other cover from Action 1 on. Batman is only on every other cover from Tech 27 on, until they decided, you know what, they're not really competing with one another. In fact, they're competing with all kind of other stuff in the marketplace. Let's get as much of the kids' dimes as we can, and they gave this up. And that's why you saw the previous book, Action 19 here. From Action 19 on, every cover has Superman on it. And I don't know, for Batman, it's Tech. What is it? Like Tech 30,
don't even give me the
35 on is everyone has Batman. But point being, that's what was happening. I will tell you that the non-Superman featured covers of Action definitely sell for a discount to the ones that have Superman on them, these early ones, right? That said, for me, this is my absolute favorite of the Action covers, the first 20 issues that don't have Superman on them. Right. I love Zatara here. I love the sci-fi theme. I love the iconography of the planets. I love the colors that were used here. The art direction was, for me, just incredible. So I am a big fan of this book. It's also an exceedingly rare book. We're still talking the first, dozen issues of Action. We're still in 1939. We're still in the second quarter of 1939. Only 32 Universal, 14 restored, just the 2 conserved. This is an important book. This is a big book. This is a book that deserves our attention. And in terms of Universal, fortunately, we've actually had a few sales at 6.0 and 5.0 in the last year. So fair market value of a 5.0, there was one hammered in the last year at 26,000. 6.0 in the last year, one hammered at 40,000. If you think about that range, we're talking here about something like greater than $5,000 per point. So we would put this 5.5 somewhere around 30 grand. I think the 41 for the 6.0 is because once you get to 6.0, you're probably in the top quartile for this book. I don't know if you looked up the median grade, but it starts to go a little bit nonlinear because there are just so few copies in high grade of this book, right? That said, what do we think a discount would be? If we think, say, that Universal is 30 to 35 grand, let's just say that's a range.
Yeah.
Where do we think this conserved copy hammers? Now, I'll say another thing about it. Presentation here, once again, is incredible. It looks more like an 8 than it does a 5.
Yeah.
I think that's going to impact the final hammer price.
There is a bit more conservation that's included in here. You have the cover reinforced, the clean, and the staples replaced. So I'm not sure what that's about, because it doesn't look like there's any rust migration that would call for the staples to be replaced from what I've seen of the front and back cover, but it could be in that black area that I don't see. I'm not sure.
Yep. Could also be in the centerfold.
It could be in the
usually you do see it in the cover if it's going to be in the
normally
centerfold,
it's in the cover,
but not always.
Not always.
I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say this book brings at least 10 grand, and I think it's going to bring closer to 15.
That's about where I was at. I'd be surprised if it hits 20. I'm thinking that 15 is probably 15 would be a healthy.
Yeah.
But it may go as little as 10. I hope not.
Yeah, but it also could hammer at 20. It wouldn't shock me just because it presents so
it
well.
would not shock me at all.
Yeah. In fact, it wouldn't even shock me if it sold for above 20. Just it presents so incredibly well, and all you need is a couple of whales that really want this book. It's so hard to find. What an exciting book. Well, I know we were building toward a book, and we have one book left. So
one left. Whew. This is not conserved, but it's a big boy. Whoa. Superman #1, restored grade. So let's talk about a couple of things first. One is these do not come, higher grade copies of these do not come on the market. Okay. Look, if you look at the thing at the bottom, no census sales above a 7.5. No census sales for a 9.0 to a 10.0. Okay. This has been in a private collector's hands. Oh, and let me say that I forgot to say that earlier. Okay, really quick. Those 3 books of Chris Farrell's, of the time of that article writing in 1983, they said, and she was showing in that picture a Superman 1, a Batman 1, and an Action Comics #1. And at that time, those 3 books were estimated valued at $23,000.
Yeah.
In 1983. So
she did all right.
She bought well. Okay, my friends.
Oh, yeah.
So the restoration for this book. I mean, first, just looking at the book, ignoring the purple label, this thing looks amazing.
It does. It looks like a 9, right? We talked about this book recently, but let's just real quick. Summer of 39. This is the very first book ever that features, it's not an anthology. It features one superhero. It's nothing but Superman stories, right? Iconic cover. We talked about this, but we're placing it in the top 5 best Superman covers of all time, maybe top 3. Really incredible cover. Super important book, and a retelling of the origin that's a little bulked up of what they had hinted at earlier, and still quite rare. Not in the realm of Action
this
1,
is still
Tech
a rare book.
but fewer than 100 copies in the census is where I call a book truly rare. So 77 Universal, by that I mean Universal. 77 Universal. Here's one of those where the number of restored copies actually exceeds the Universal. 102 restored copies. I will tell you, Shelby, I think that's going to hold it back a little bit, because there is a larger pool of restored copies available in the market than there are Universal, which usually isn't the case. 4 qualified, 2 conserved. All of that said, we want to talk about the restoration a little bit. Color touch, pieces added, tear seals, reinforced. This particular book has had significant work. So it's A3, A meaning professional, 3 meaning on a scale of 1 through 5, 5 being the most amount.
Is it 4 or 5?
This book is a 3, meaning, basically moderate, not slight, but moderate amount of work. That said, some of the work,
none of this stuff was uncommon at the time in which she bought
of course.
this. And she could have even had it done after she bought it, because that picture showed she owned it in 83.
Sure.
This was not uncommon.
Also to the point we made earlier regarding, restoration used to include all these different techniques. Now they've been broken out. So some of the techniques here would qualify for conservation today. Unfortunately, color touch is never going to be one of those.
That's right.
And so, this book is always going to be restored unless you remove the color touch. I just don't suspect that's, even if it was financially viable, that anybody would have the stomach to do that. So this book is what it is now, and it's going to stay a restored book for the conceivable future. Is my prediction.
Yep.
So the last fair market value 7.0 Universal sold for $2.34 million. That was a recent record broken.
That was a recent record.
There's a whole movie coming out on a 7.0 Superman Universal called Selling Superman that drops in the next month. About someone who inherited a 7.0 Superman. And it being obviously a multi-million-dollar book. One of the, you'll notice the census is flat here after 8.5. There's just almost no copies in Universal. There may be literally 0 copies after 8. There are, right?
You have 1 restored at
one Universal 8.5. So a 7 is basically tied for 3rd best in the census. That said, this restored 8.0, there are a few above an 8 in the restored census. And I think it's going to be discounted more than normal because there are so many restored copies of this, Shelby. I think this is going to be a fraction of the Universal price.
Okay, now that's where I'm curious of. Do we think it breaks 1 million?
I do not think so.
Do we think it hits 800,000? So here's some of my thoughts. Here's some of my thoughts.
Go ahead. You go first.
7.0, 2.3 million. We've seen over and over that certain books in restored grades bring around 30 to sometimes 50%, depending on the book.
Sure.
if we throw a couple of thousand and pretend and play pretend that there is a 8.0 out there that sold, what would it sell for?
Sure. Well, there is an
2
8.0, but it's never traded
It's
hands as
never
far as we
sold.
know.
Yeah. So if that were to sell, would it sell for 2.5, 2.6?
No, I'll tell you, it goes for more than that. This is what I think.
I agree with you. I
I
agree with
think the Universal 8.0 goes for 3 million. I think the
I
Universal
agree.
8.5 goes for 5 million or close to it, being the highest graded copy known to exist.
I
in
agree
Universal.
with you. So then if we were to take a percentage of 50% of 5 million is $2.5 million, right? And then if you were to say 30%, you're still over $1 million.
No, I get you.
Okay,
I just don't think it's gonna.
I mean,
I
but
think
I don't know. I'm doing math. I'm playing math and fantasy in my head, right? My gut does say it's going to be under $1 million, but looking at our math of what we've seen restored books go for, the math doesn't work.
No, this book could break 1 million, right? We know there's an action one that broke 1 million. That said, I'll tell you what I think. I think this is going to be around $500,000, and I think the big reason is because there are so many 8.0 restored copies. There are 8.5 restored copies. There are 9.0 restored copies. There's a 9.4 restored copy. No, actually, there's a 9.6 restored copy.
There's 9.6, 196.
So we're not looking at like one of the top 3 high. We're not looking at the second highest graded in Census like we would be in Universal. There's a huge premium on the 8.0 Universal because it's the second highest graded known in Universal. And so there's going to be a big discount just because of the abundance of higher grade restored copies out there. So the supply is much greater than the demand in terms of relative to this book in Universal. And that's why I think it's going to be a big discount. That said, man, it'd be great to sit back and pop some popcorn and watch this thing crack 7 digits. That would be fun. And who knows? Who knows? It also wouldn't shock me if it sold for $1 million. I just don't think it's quite going to get there. I think it's going to be half that.
I was thinking around 600,000.
Yeah, I think that's a great, great prediction.
I would love to see it though get 1 million, but you're right. Those people, whales, looking for this book, I think you are correct that there's maybe 2 different categories of whales. One that's going to wait on that universal grade, and then those that don't mind a restored grade. And there are so many, and that population is smaller, but the supply is larger.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, this is an incredible auction. Let's remind everybody, this is fewer than 500 books, and the total run of every DC book published up until what is it? What year did you
I don't
say?
know where she stopped. I know there are some Silver Age DCs.
Oh yeah, no, she took it all the way to like 2000 or something. I want to.
Yeah, there are some Silver Age DCs in this auction. I didn't see any Bronze Age. There may be some. There is some original art. There's some Neil Adams original art, Bernie Wrightson, Frank Miller original art from Dark Knight Returns #4. I think it's all. I think there's a complete set of the original art for first Swamp Thing, Bernie Wrightson.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Is that Swamp Thing 1 or is that House of Secrets 92?
No, Swamp Thing 1.
Man. Vulu, you'll be able to get something from her collection because it goes all the way up to like 2000-ish. You're going to be able to pick up a book from her collection if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
This auction is basically
I sorted by low price, and there's quite a few books in the $100 range right now. I would think you can pick up something. Now, maybe a funny animal book, I'm not sure, but and I'm just making things that up.
The rest of her, not all of her collection is going to be auctioned off by Heritage. The rest of it will be brought by her estate through other means, and you'll be able to find, like a non-key Silver Age issue of Superman or Justice League or whatever, you're going to be able to find those books in the few $100 range. If that's something you want, you'll be able to get one. Well, everybody's made promises on when they win the lottery, what they're going to do for one another, which I think is just amazing. And we appreciate all of you. I'm looking forward to this auction big time. I'm going to definitely be watching it. I'm going to have one hand on my paddle if any of these, if anybody's sleeping on them, man.
I'm unemployed, so I'm going to be a bottom feeder on, you know, on things, low end that might interest me. You know, that more fun. Oh, I'd love to pick up.
Well, it's gonna
I'd
be
love
more
to.
fun. You didn't say Bald is Beautiful at all once this entire show.
Well,
Shelby,
and it's great. You and I talked about this a little bit, and we talked about this a little bit a week or so ago, right? Is the people that have these books are sadly passing away, moving on, getting rid of the collection, things like that. And it's not uncommon now, right? We just saw the big DC collection from was it Hakes or who? No, it was that DC collection a month ago?
There's another big one every month, it seems like.
It does seem like it. So these things are starting to come about, is what I'm getting at. Because I do know, like, I owned a store in the late 80s and stuff, and I know there's high grade golden age out there. I used to see it change hands. I used to see it at conventions. Okay, so I know it's out there. Hopefully it hasn't been lost to time, floods, fires, you know, kids throwing away daddy's collection or mommy's collection or something. But these things are starting to slowly come to market now. So it's a great time for those of us.
Well, I guess, you could hopefully those folks enjoyed them during their time on this this blue marble, and you know, they've gone on and hopefully left something for their family and provide for them, and turn some of these books into new collectors. Hopefully it's not a bunch of Bitcoin bros that buy them out from us, real collectors.
Exactly. And that's part of it, right? Is that the community will hopefully get to enjoy a lot of these books that I know she loved and cherished, right?
Yeah. And I think the bulk of this will go to people that you know, that are in the trenches collecting comics. So
yeah, I think so too.
What a great auction coming up. Thank you so much for putting together that deck. Thanks for joining me, Shelby. Really appreciate you. Safe travels to Captain Larry, and get well soon to Brother Phil. And thanks for everybody that joined us and left us comments in the chat. We appreciate all of you. Until next time, take care of one another.
And remember, hey, thank y'all for joining. So happy to be part of this community. But most of all, peace, love, and comics. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.